So I am Brad Chapman Bleau. I'm an interdisciplinary artist, educator. I am an adjunct professor here at Worcester State University. I teach drawing, painting, and illustration. And I'm also the curator of the Mary Cosgrove Dolphin Art Gallery. I've been making art since I was a kid. I didn't really take it seriously until like my junior year of high school, which is probably 2009. So what's that math? Like 15 years I've been really kind of taking it seriously as an artist. But I grew up, my dad was really creative growing up. He's a carpenter, so he taught me how to use tools and start building my own things. And you know, I've always had it in my life, but it took a while to really focus in on it. I've been describing my art as lowbrow pop surrealism. So the lowbrow kind of refers to, you know, this kind of imagery that doesn't traditionally belong in an art gallery. You know, a lot of advertising, a lot of kind of weird grossness happening. You know, the pop art refers to the kind of colors that I use and the kind of imagery that I use. And then surrealism is really, you know, the way that I think about art and the way that I think about reality versus the imagined, and kind of has to do with the context and the world that my art lives in. You know, I think traditionally art has been taken a little bit too seriously. I think art should be fun. I think it should be, or it at least can pose an opportunity to be interactive and to get the viewer involved in not only the way it's interpreted, but the actual process of art making. You know, I like to think I have a decent sense of humor, and I think that's pretty important in my work. You know, I don't take life too seriously, and I don't think anybody should take it too seriously. There is a through line of kind of seriousness and meaning behind all the work that I create, but there is definitely a nonsensical element to all of it as well. Yeah, so I use a lot of junk in my art, and I use this term junk to refer to this kind of cultural detritus that you know, people have left behind. I grew up going to yard sales a lot and thrift stores, and you know, kind of rummaging through other people's stuff to find something that you connect with. And that's been kind of going on my whole life, and it took a while to realize that, you know, my two passions, like junk collecting and art, could really meld into one practice. And yeah, I mean, you know, nostalgia is a powerful thing to use in art. It helps us connect with one another, and we all have these kinds of shared experiences with these objects. So it becomes this kind of like universal visual language that helps us connect to one another. So yeah, the interactivity was an important part. You know, like I said, the kind of accessibility for everyone to be able to enjoy the exhibit. But also thinking about the fact that this is a contemporary gallery. You know, we're trying to kind of break these preconceptions and these stigmas that traditional art galleries have. So the idea of nobody being allowed to touch the artwork is something fun for an artist to play around with. For me to put some interactive pieces in here and then keep other ones not interactive, it's interesting to see this kind of temptation to touch the non-touchable work. You know, it's like when you're a kid and someone tells you not to touch something, the first thing you want to do is touch it. So when I give you permission to touch certain things in here, I think there's even more of a temptation to touch everything. And I like that kind of, you know, that energy of should I touch it? Should I not? I wonder if this drawer actually pulls out and if there's something in there, you know, kind of activating people's curiosity. Inspiration can really come from anywhere. You know, some pieces start off really with an object that I find, and that will kind of dictate where the artwork goes. Other times it's this kind of automated, subconscious drawing that I do, trying not to think of an end product and really just letting my subconscious thoughts kind of bubble to the top. And then I go in with the objects and figure out where they fit and what needs to be, kind of incorporated to push the narrative. But yeah, I mean, another part of it, I think, is just my wife is also a fiber artist, and we just riff back and forth, ideas, and we talk a lot, and we laugh, and come up with stupid ideas. And I think a lot of my work actually stems from that. I don't know what it is about my brain that allows me or makes me think of these things. I think everything that I was influenced by as a kid definitely brought a lot of this imagery and kind of weirdness to my art. SpongeBob and Pokemon and these weird characters that McDonald's created, and I think all of these things subconsciously made me want to become an artist and have humor in my art and make people happy with my art. How I come up with this stuff, it's always a process. It always starts in something small. A lot of times it starts with a face, or it starts with an object, and then it kind of builds from there and turns into something else. And something that I kind of mindfully do in my work is give you just enough information for you to kind of figure out something that's going on, but not give too much information. I don't like to talk about the meaning behind the pieces because it's really up for interpretation. So I intentionally leave the meaning kind of vague for people to kind of plug in their own ideas about what's going on. So my creative process has really changed over the years. I went to Mass Art for illustration and got my bachelor's there. And being trained kind of traditionally as an illustrator, you're taught to really focus on sketches and developing the kind of, whatever story you're trying to tell, you need to really develop it visually. So you go through iterations of sketches before you're even allowed to start the final product. And then I went to grad school at Goddard College, which was a very different kind of experience. A lot more free-form, a lot more reactive, and just being kind of present in the moment while art making. So I think there's kind of a balance now of this kind of pre-planned preconception of what my art is going to look like, and having this freedom of not being attached to the final product and kind of letting things unfold as they should. I find it pretty easy to curate other people's art. When there's no kind of emotional attachment to the art, I think it's a little bit easier to discern, what's gonna go where and what's gonna work. Where when it's your own and you're really trying to kind of, cultivate this space and this feeling within the gallery. I don't know, there's something about it that's a little bit harder to find those through lines, maybe. The other thing is I didn't put everything in here that I wanted to. I had ideas for pieces that I wanted to get in here, but time was always a factor, and I didn't, I kind of ran out of time for some of the pieces. Majority I got in here, and I'm really happy with the way it came out, but there's always that, well, if I had had a couple more days, I could have put something else in here. So, selecting which pieces of mine came into this gallery, it really had to do with this series that I was working on that focused on material culture and visual culture and associations with objects and characters and advertising. So I think all the pieces in here kind of have something to do with that. But regularly when we do a lot of group shows in the gallery, so it's inviting artists from pretty much all over New England to submit to a certain theme. So when we're going through and picking which pieces get in, it has to do with how well they fit the theme of the show. It has to do with the quality of the artwork. It also has to do with how they interact with one another, each piece. Sometimes we'll have a show and we'll realize like one particular artwork does not go at all, either aesthetically or contextually. So, sometimes we got to take that out. But it's usually a group effort between myself, I'm the curator, Stacy, who's the director, and then we have 3 interns right now that we all kind of collaboratively decide what's gonna go where and what's gonna get in and kind of how the gallery is gonna be arranged. Having a solo exhibition is something that I've thought about for a number of years. And it takes a while to get there. I think in terms of having confidence as an artist, I think is important for having a solo show. But also you have to create a body of work that can fill a gallery, which is hard when you're selling work too. I mean, I've sold a lot of artwork over the years, and if I wanted to have a solo show 5 years ago, I couldn't have, because I didn't have the amount of work that I have now. So I think kind of being conscious of what I'm selling and what I'm holding on to intentionally kind of prepared me for the solo show. But I'm really, really honored that I get to show the work in the place that I work and the place that I teach. I think that was a really it was a privilege, or it is a privilege for me to be able to use this space to have my solo show. So I don't know if there's a story behind all the cigarettes, but I was a smoker for years, and I haven't smoked in over 5 years at least. And I don't know, maybe it's a way of dealing with the addiction to nicotine and cigarettes, and I kind of get that high from putting it in my artwork. But I also think there's this romanticized vision of smoking in media and art, and this idea of the artist smoking a cigarette in his studio while working. Something that I did for years. It was a big part of my artistic practice, was going out for a smoke break, and that's kind of an opportunity to stop and reflect on what you've been doing, and again, putting these things on the back burner for a little bit. But it's also, it was a big part of the community at art school, was going out with your friends and having a cigarette, or meeting people outside for a cigarette if they were in different parts of the building or whatever. So I don't know, it just became such a big part of art making, that when I was trying to think of my process through the years and the things that have influenced me, cigarettes were a big part of it. And there's also this idea of the cigarette companies in the 70s and the 80s and 90s pushing cigarettes on people, and the advertising that went along with that, the creation of the Marlboro Man, the Joe Camel, spending money on cigarettes so you could get Camel Cash or Marlboro Bucks that you could then spend on their company's advertising ploys, basically. So I think there's a lot of kind of reasons why I put them in, subconscious and conscious. So it's weirdly become a part of the art that I make, even though I don't smoke cigarettes. Everyone assumes that I do, but yeah. You talking about Good Boy? Yeah, I mean, he's become kind of a mascot, at least for the run of this show. So it's a block of wood that I found on the farm that my wife works on. It's really old and weathered and has, most of the paint is chipped away. So I had this piece of wood, and I didn't know what I was going to do with it. And I started putting things together. I had this tongue. It's like a foam tongue that I was going to go in a different piece, but I couldn't really make it work. So I decided I was going to make some sort of creature out of the block of wood. So I mounted mid-century modern furniture legs, really nice kind of furniture legs, onto this kind of, decrepit piece of wood, put some eyes on it, and stuck the tongue in there. And it really, I think the point of it is not everything has to be high art. There can be lowbrow art. There can be kind of things in here that are just funny and kind of stupid. But they support everything else that's going in here. The show is not about that piece, but I think that piece, you know, pushes the narrative that I'm trying to achieve here. And yeah, just, I mean, the title now is turned into a thing. Every night when we leave the gallery, we say good boy, and we say bye to the creature that lives in here. Yeah, so the artist's dilemma is a large pedestal that has a pile of junk on it, very small objects, you know, like no bigger than 2 inches, and a picture frame. And the idea was to really give the viewer a glimpse into my artistic process, which sometimes consists of just making a mess and taking out all of this stuff and finding the connections between them. And sometimes those connections are physical, you know, I have to think about what will actually fit together. And other times they're contextual, you know, how do these things communicate with one another to form some sort of narrative, you know, that I can kind of push in my artwork. So that's part of it. And another big part is I work with kids in some capacity in another job. My wife works at an organization called Turn Back Time. It's an outdoor education center. And I work there, you know, 1 day a week, maybe 2, and I'm also on the board there. So I knew my opening would have a lot of kids here, which it did. It had a couple families. And I wanted there to be something in here that is interactive, that is accessible to kids, that's accessible to people who don't normally come to gallery shows and, you know, stare at the artwork and talk about the meaning behind it and everything. You know, I wanted there to be some sort of like fun, interactive element for everybody to enjoy. Yeah, I mean, this was a piece that I had, this was one of those pieces that I had an idea for. It started with this yoke, which is, you know, a piece of farm equipment, but I thought it would make a really interesting, you know, base for something to hang from. And there's kind of an ongoing joke around the gallery that my pockets are always filled with stuff, which makes sense because I like stuff. So I always have, you know, a lighter and a knife, a pocket knife, and some cash, and a bunch of notes that I've written. So I really wanted to create a piece that focused on the things that we carry, you know, our daily kind of stuff that we carry. So my wife is a fiber artist, like I said, so she actually crocheted this little patch of grass for everything to kind of fall onto out of this guy's pockets. And then I kind of blended it into the ground by using dirt and rocks and, you know, natural materials, trying to make that yarn look a little bit more natural. And, you know, these things aren't fixed onto the yarn. They're just sitting there. And I always run the risk of somebody walking off with it. You know, there's money there. But I think that's kind of part of the art. You know, there's this like impermanence or, you know, finiteness of these objects. You know, even some of the other pieces, like the Mr. Peanut piece, has some actual peanuts in it. Those things might not last forever. So something that I'm doing in this show that I've never really done before is creating artwork that really is only supposed to exist for the show. You know, all the other work kind of exists in this, someone can buy it and someone can hang it on their wall, but how or why do we make artwork that isn't really supposed to exist anywhere else? So it's interesting just working that way and thinking that way, kind of different from how I've thought before.
Has anyone tried to take the money? Or
Not that I know. I mean, you know, there's the piece over there, the artist's dilemma, is just a table full of junk. It would be very easy for someone to just slip something into their pocket, and if that's the case, then I'm okay with that. You know, again, I have all of these things to represent something or to tell some sort of story. I don't, you know, what happens to them is just kind of meant to happen. If somebody walks off with something, then somebody walks off with something. What's next? I mean, I'm really focusing on teaching right now. I just am in the process of developing a new course for Worcester State. So it's a course based on illustration, which was my focus in undergrad. So I'm really working on developing that and working out the assignments and all of the things that we're going to be looking at, and getting possibly some community involvement in the illustration class. That's really where I'm focusing on. Taking a little bit of break from art making because it was a pretty hard push that I gave at the last month or two. But I'll be submitting to group shows here at Arts Worcester, different galleries around here, and I'm going to keep making art.